guys, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Mountaineering podcast. Now this podcast is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming mountaineering adventure. Once a week, I'm going to be sharing with you in-depth and evidence-backed information around improving your physical performance on the mountain, reducing your likelihood of pain and injury, nutrition for mountaineers, and even a bit of mental strength development, so you can be empowered in your training to give yourself the very best chance of a safe, enjoyable, and successful mountaineering adventure. So now that you know what you're in for, let's get into today's episode. Hello guys. Today we are talking all about your pre-training routine. Now obviously on this podcast we love training for mountaineering, and so far I've talked quite a bit about what you can do in your actual sessions to get the best benefits and help you best on the mountain. But also, which we haven't touched on so much yet, is what you do before your training sessions. So whether this is before you're hiking, before you're climbing, before your strength training, before you're running, before whatever you are doing, what you do up in the lead up to these sessions can really play a big impact into the effectiveness of this upcoming training session. And specifically what you do really plays into how well you perform in this session, how comfortable you feel, and ultimately how much you get out of that session, which is actually going to help you on the mountain moving forward. Because obviously we want to be performing at our best in our training so we can perform at our best on the mountain. And today we're just going to be talking through a few very simple things that any mountaineer can do leading into their training sessions to get the most out of them. Now today I'm going to talk through about 7 different things. Obviously there's dozens and dozens of other techniques and strategies you can do to improve your performance when you're training. But today we're just going to keep it simple, talk through stuff that I know works, that is super simple to do and pretty much anyone can put into action. So let's get into it. Now, number 1, as part of your pre-training routine is 100% you need to make sure you are fully hydrated leading into your sessions. Now, the reason I say this is something that so many people overlook, but it's one of those incredibly simple and tiny, small things which can really make a big difference. Now, even small amounts of dehydration can have some pretty significant impacts into your strength, into your power, into your aerobic conditioning, into your perception of fatigue. So if you're leading into any of your sessions dehydrated, it is really going to play into effect what you actually get out of that session. Now, when I say this, you don't have to mean you have to drink huge amounts of water before going into a session. You don't have to do outrageous prehydration strategies, which some people recommend, or anything like that. It's not incredibly complicated, but basically in the hour leading into your session, you want to go to the bathroom, you want to take a whiz, and you want to have a look at your urine color. Now, if it is not clear to straw colored, that means you want to drink a little bit more water and you want to get that to clear to straw colored before you lead into your training session. It's as simple as that, and that is what you want to be aiming for. Now, as a general rule of thumb, you kind of want to keep that pretty around there most of the day. And a really easy test of this is if you go to the bathroom 3 times in the day, you want to make sure at least 2 of those times in the day you're passing that clear to straw colored test. You know, that's not rocket science, that's not exact, but it's a good thing to aim for. So number 1, make sure you're hydrated leading into your training sessions. Number 2 is carb up. So carbohydrates, no matter what type of training you are doing, whether it's your hiking, your climbing, your strength session, whatever, they are going to be the primary fuel source leading into your session. So you really want to make sure that your body is topped up. It has enough carbohydrates to fuel your performance, and also has enough carbohydrates which are easily accessible to really make sure you're getting the most out of your session. Now, a super easy way to do that is just 60 minutes before you train, just making sure you have some type of simple carbohydrates, that you eat. So some dried fruit or a piece of fruit, maybe, some lollies or whatever it may be, depending on whether you prefer to go down the whole food route or not so whole food. There's so many different options out there, and there's a million resources online that you can have a look at that. Now, That's probably about 60 minutes before a session. You just want to have a little bit of carbohydrates and get you going. If you are in the situation where you're waking up in the morning, first thing, rolling out of bed and getting into training, obviously waking up and having food an hour beforehand isn't super realistic. So the option here is, if you do need something that's a bit quicker at digesting, is having some type of liquid carbohydrates, which is usually in the form of a sports drink. So Gatorade or whatever you may be doing. Now this stuff is super quickly digesting, gets into the body really quickly, doubles up as hydration as well. And you can have that like 10 minutes before or just as you're walking out the door or whatever it may be. Now, if you're listening to this and you are not on carbohydrates, so you're chasing keto, you're chasing fat adaptation, you're just living a low carb diet or whatever it may be, and you prefer not to have carbohydrates before a session, that's fine. Please don't send me hate mail saying I'm completely wrong on this. Please don't go down that route. I'm not talking to you on this point. If you go down that route, that's perfectly fine. You do you with that. But if you're not following a specific keto or fat adaptation plan and you're just eating a normal diet, high carbohydrates just before you train or in the hour leading up can be super effective, and I highly recommend you get around it. But for the guys doing fat adaptation here, just ignore that last point. It is perfectly fine. Next point is number 3 that you should be doing or should consider in your pre-training routine is getting a bit of caffeine in your system. Now, caffeine is the world's most popular performance enhancing drug, and it improves pretty much every single marker of performance under the sun. So it improves your time to exhaustion, improves your power output, your strength output, it decreases your perception of fatigue, it increases your running speed on the whole, well, maybe not increases your running speed, I think it increases time trial performance or something like that, and pretty much improves your alertness and your concentration and pretty much every single performance marker under the sun. So it can be super effective. Now, I'm not saying here go out and get a massive pre-workout shake and just get buzzing and absolutely get off your face with that type of stuff. Lots of people do it, but I don't recommend that. But this can be as simple as having a coffee before your training, or if you're not into coffee, having a caffeine pill or a no dose or something like that. Now, this can be super effective, whether it's your strength sessions, whether it's your cardio sessions, whether it's your actual hiking or your climbing. It can be really good. Now, one thing to be aware of with the caffeine intake is it takes roughly 45 minutes to reach peak concentration in your blood, which means if you want to get the most out of your sessions, you kind of want to time this out appropriately. So, for example, if you're doing a strength session, obviously you want to be having that peak caffeine concentration sort of hit you around by the time you finished your warm-up. So, saying your warm-up goes for 10-15 minutes max, you probably have your coffee maybe 30 minutes before a strength session, or you time it out depending on where you're sitting. Alternatively, if you're doing a longer conditioning session, so if you're doing a long hike, if you're doing a long run, a long ride, or whatever it may be, you might want to consider having a look at this and having it just before you set out. So that way, by the time you get 45 minutes in, when you're starting to reach those first fatigue levels and starting to get a little bit tired, that caffeine will pop up, it'll kick in, and it'll keep you going. So you can play around with this, but just know it takes roughly 45 minutes to reach peak concentration. Now, the only other point on this is if you are training at night, I probably wouldn't recommend getting around the caffeine because, you don't want to be compromising your sleep. In that situation, you might look at some other type of pre-workout thing, which isn't so much stimulatory. So it might be, just getting you a little bit more focused. It might simply be a few extra carbs. It might be whatever it may be. There's lots of options out there, but I probably wouldn't recommend the caffeine route at night. Now, the next thing is something that's a little bit away from the usual recommendations, but something that's probably just as important as all those things I just mentioned, and that is turn off your phone. Now, there is nothing else that will ruin a training session or a hiking session or whatever it may be as getting emails or getting work texts or getting social media during your sessions. Turn off your phone or have it on airplane mode or leave it in your car, whatever you need to do, but do not give yourself the temptation to be distracted. Do not give yourself the temptation to, sit in your rest periods and do stuff or something to come up. It's just not practical and it's going to ruin so much of your training potential. So turn off your phone, have it on airplane mode or leave it in the car and do whatever you need to do. Now, if you've got a training watch, you need to figure out a way that, yes, you can track your statistics. You need to figure out a way that you're not going to get notifications while you're training, because again, it's an absolute trap and you do not want to be messing around with it. So take it from me. I've seen that many people really lose so many sessions through this. Get rid of it. Don't be tempted, and take that out of your training equation. The next thing I want to talk about is if you are feeling a little bit flat leading into a training session. So say you've had a big week, say you've had, a big day, say you haven't been sleeping well, maybe you're just demotivated, whatever it may be. On top of all the stuff we've just talked about, another really, really simple thing, which probably a lot of people are already doing, is getting some music or videos, inspirational videos before your training session. Now, it may be a bit corny, but it absolutely works. There's a lot of studies that show it works in a clinical setting, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to show as well. If you have a particular training playlist that gets you pumped, gets you excited, gets you really, really ready to go, watch that half an hour before, listen to that half an hour before going into your sessions. Listen to that while you're running, whatever you need to do, and that'll really, really help. The same thing with inspirational videos. So, those things can be, it might be a mountaineering expedition, it might be climbing, it might be, a sports movie, it might be anything else that gets you pumped up. It's super, super effective. So if you do struggle with energy and you are leading into a session, you're like, mate, I've got nothing in me. Get around the videos. Doesn't matter where you are, get pumped up, make the most of the sessions. And the last thing I want to talk about today is simply knowing what you're going to do in your session. Now, I highly, highly, highly encourage people already be working off a structured plan so they know what they're leading into. Like, I'm not a big fan of people going into the gym or going into training sessions and just making up their mind on the spot what they're going to do. It might be good for general fitness, or good enough for general fitness, I should say. But if you're training for mountaineering, you got to do better than that. So have a plan. But on top of having a plan, you want to know your plan. You want to know your plan hours in advance of exactly what you're doing that day. You want to know, if you're doing a strength session, your exact exercises, your exact repetition ranges, exactly what exercise you're going to try and push yourself and beat your PBs, or push a bit of an extra weight, or whatever it may be. If you're doing a run, you want to know exactly where you're running. You want to know exactly how long you want to take. You want to know exactly how hard you're going to push and what zones you're going to be training at, or what level intensity. You want to know your plan intimately. Don't roll into a session and just think, look at your plan and figure it out on the spot. You want that leading time. You want to be thinking about it through the day, or at least for a couple of hours, because that's so, so crucial to making the most out of these sessions. And it's something I highly recommend. Now, building off that, you do have the opportunity, if you know your plan, is to use visualization to prep yourself for these sessions. So if you are leading into a strength session and say you're doing heavy step-ups or whatever it may be, you can picture yourself doing those step-ups through the day, in the morning, at lunch, in the afternoon, then roll into your session. And there is science behind the fact that simply visualizing and thinking in your head, if you're doing these exercises, it can literally make you stronger. That is no joke. If you literally imagine yourself doing it, you can get stronger. There's some crazy research around that. And the fact for your sessions, if you're imagining you doing these exercises through the day, you're going to prime yourself. You're going to get yourself pumped. You're going to get yourself ready so you can perform your best in the session. Again, the same thing with your conditioning things. If you're doing a loaded pack carry, if you're doing a stair session, you can visualize that in your head. You can think about what you're going to push, how it's going to feel, how you're going to push through it when you're getting tired, and it's really, really, really going to help you. So I highly recommend get around it. But if you are struggling for energy, or you simply just want to get the most out of your training sessions, make sure you're hydrated. Make sure you got some carbohydrates in your system if you are not chasing fat adaptation. Make sure you're getting caffeine in if you're not training at night. Turn off your phone. Get around the music and the inspirational videos, know your plan, and get that visualization in. And I will 100% guarantee if you're missing any of those things right now and you put that into your routine, it'll make a massive, massive difference to your training, to your performance, and ultimately to your success and comfort and enjoyment on the mountain. So I highly recommend you get around it. Now, that is enough from me today, guys. Now, if you have been enjoying this podcast and you have been getting some value out of the episodes and you have been really, really getting into the information, please, 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 I would absolutely love if you could just share this podcast with another mountaineer. If you just pass it along, if any of these lessons or education may help, and just spread the love a little bit and get the word out there. But thank you very much for listening today, guys. Hope you got some value out of it, and we'll talk to you very soon. Bye.